I predict that within 5 years, iPhones will have no ports at all. Alright, so I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, yeah, okay, yeah, sure, that's crazy, you're insane. But am I? I mean, think about it. This is Apple we're talking about here. This is the company that loves to take things that we use and then throw them away. They started with the original iMac. Boom. No floppy disk drive. People were like, oh my gosh. And then they started slowly attacking the CD drive. A couple of years later, I say a couple, like 10 years later, you get the MacBook Air, then the redesigned iMac, the Retina MacBook Pro. Eventually, they're gone. CD drives are not on any Mac anymore. And then they started systematically going after USB Type-A, and also pretty much every other port. When they started introducing USB-C in 2015 on the MacBook, then 2016 they killed it off the MacBook Pro, and then now we've killed it off of the MacBook Air, although you can still buy the really old crummy MacBook Air for some reason, so that's the only laptop that you can get legacy ports on. And I say legacy ports, and I'm really talking about an SD card reader and USB Type-A ports. So yeah, that's where we are right now. Apple loves taking ports away. So it's only logical that the iPhones, which only have one port, could end up with none. So what exactly would that look like? What does a portless iPhone mean? Well, there's a couple of things that you might use a port for on an iPhone. The first one, obviously, is charging. This is pretty much the main function of a port on an iPhone. So since 2017, a port wasn't necessary to keep your phone charged because we have Qi wireless charging. So if you have a wireless charging pad like I do, you don't need to plug a phone in to charge it. I just have a stand that I keep on my desk or by my bed, and my phone stays charged. So I don't need to use the Lightning port for charging anymore. So the second use for a port is data transfer. Now this one's a little bit more tricky, and the reason why I think it's going to take a bit of time before we see an iPhone with no ports is because it is going to take some adjustment to a world where you don't have any wired data transfer. But basically, a lot of people plug their phone into their USB port on their MacBook or their iMac or whatever, and then they back up to iTunes to keep their phone backed up. That's a very important one. Also, taking photos off of your phone. Sometimes you can restore apps onto your phone over a wired connection to a computer. However, you don't necessarily need that. So theoretically, in a world where you don't have any wired data transfer, you would back up to iCloud, you'd download all of your apps through like the App Store or just, have them up in the cloud as well. Your photos are backed up to iCloud, and if you need to transfer anything from your phone to your computer, like a photo or a video, then you would use AirDrop, which, to be honest, I already use. Like when I take video with my phone, as I do quite often, if I want to get them onto the computer, I don't go hunting for a USB to Lightning adapter and then another adapter to get it into a USB-C port. No, what I do is I just AirDrop it because it's a lot easier. So theoretically, it's not impossible to live in a world where you don't have any wired data transfer. Now, the biggest complaint, I think, is going to be the whole backup situation, because a lot of people are probably in the position where they say, I don't pay for an iCloud plan. I only have that 5 gigabyte one. I can't back up my 128 gigabyte iPhone 7 to that because that's ridiculous. They would much rather just back up to their computer where storage is more plentiful. So I can see that as being the case, but you also have to keep in mind that most MacBooks start with 128 or 256 gigabytes of storage, whereas you can quite easily get an iPhone with more storage than that. Like, the tiers for the iPhone XS go 64, then 256. So if you bump that storage tier up, then any baseline MacBook won't have enough storage if you fill your phone up to back it up anyway. And then if you think about it, even if you bump your MacBook up to 256, you're still pretty tight on space to be backing up your phone there. So you'd have to have something like an iMac with a 1 or 2 terabyte Fusion drive in order to realistically be backing up to your main computer's hard drive, or you'd have to have like an external hard drive that you store your backups on. So I guess it's not that crazy to me that we wouldn't be able to back up over a wired connection if we had an iPhone with no ports on it. It doesn't seem as crazy now that I talk through it out loud. So the next use for a port on an iPhone is audio. Now there used to be 2 ports on an iPhone, believe it or not. I know this is crazy for you to believe, but there used to be you would charge it with the 1 port, and then there was this like circle-y one that you'd plug sound into, and then you could listen to sound through. The headphone jack, that's what it was. Well, of course, that's all done and gone, and now you need to use an adapter to go from Lightning to a 3.5mm headphone jack, so already you can see that Apple is kind of encouraging wireless audio. So I personally just used the Lightning earpods that shipped with the iPhone, and then now I finally got AirPods about 2 years too late, so now I use these. So pretty much, I guess now I don't need the port for audio either. So you can kind of see how we're starting to move away from this Lightning port. I mean, on my iPhone XS, I really don't use the port at all, now that I think about it, because I charge wirelessly, I listen wirelessly. Ironically, the only time I need a Lightning port is to charge my wireless headphones. So that's interesting. But eventually these are going to be wireless too, and you won't need a port on these either. You know, I'll be honest, when I sat down to make this video and I wrote out the list of things, I was a little skeptical, but now that I'm talking through them, I could legitimately see this being feasible. Sure, it's gonna piss a lot of people off. A phone with no ports, oh man, if you thought 2016, no headphone jack, or 2016, oh, it's all USB-C was bad, whew, you have not seen anything yet. The storm of anger when Apple removes all ports is going to be unlike anything we've ever seen. But I do think it's gonna happen. I'm just now realizing there's one more use for a port, which is diagnostics or data recovery. So not necessarily for backups if your phone is working, but if your phone is damaged, you have to get the data off of it. I mean, you don't have to, but you'd probably want to get the data off of it. And you'd also want a diagnostic port if your display isn't functioning or it's cracked beyond repair. You might want to diagnose the phone. So that one, you'd probably be able to get away with having an internal port like they used to do on the MacBook Pros. They had that sort of mystery port to nowhere for data recovery now that they use soldered SSD. So you could have something like that. Although they don't even have that anymore, so maybe they'll just say, your data's done. You're cooked. You're done. You're toast. So that very well may happen. And then as far as normal diagnostics, that's done on the phone itself nowadays. There's a diagnostic program that is on every iPhone that you can't access on your own for some reason. It has to be initiated by either an Apple technician over the phone at the Genius Bar or even over the chat. Sometimes they'll start up that diagnostic that runs natively on your phone without it being hardwired into anything. So if your phone is on, then that's your primary means of diagnosis. You don't need to plug it into anything. So yeah, I guess that would be possible too. I don't know. I mean, it really doesn't seem like that much of a stretch to go from having the Lightning port to having no ports. The biggest change would be in people's infrastructure, because you'd have to have wireless chargers. I mean, I guess you wouldn't have to have, but you'd probably want to have more room in iCloud for photos and backups and stuff like that. Yeah, you'd have to change your lifestyle a good amount. But then again, we've already kind of done that now that everyone's removing the headphone jack. We've already sort of removed wired headphones from our lives, a lot of us, and switched over to wireless. So the next step would be to switch over from a wired charger to a wireless charger. And sure, it's more expensive, and Apple would probably have to ship a wireless charger in the box, which we all know they're not going to be happy about because they like their big profit margins, but I think it's possible. I think it's doable. I don't want it to happen because as little as I use my Lightning port, it's nice to have in case it's necessary. Stuff like CarPlay uses a wired port, although more and more often there's wireless CarPlay starting to show up in cars. It all kind of points to a completely wireless future. And I think Apple is definitely the company that's going to want to jump on that in a mainstream way. So that's just kind of my thoughts on where we're heading with iPhones. I don't think it's going to be this year. I don't think it's going to be next year. It might be, we might see iPhones switch to USB-C to be like the MacBooks and the iPad Pros. I think that would be great in the meantime before Apple really finally kills off the port. Having USB-C across all of my devices would be really nice because then I'd only need to carry one charger around, or one type of charger anyway. So I think that would be very cool to see, but I do think the day is coming when you're not going to have a port on your iPhone. And then a couple of days after that, all the other phones won't have ports either, most likely. So that'll do it for today's video. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know your thoughts. Would you be able to get by with a portless iPhone? Let me know down in the comments below. And as usual, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the little notification bell so that you can see whenever I have another ranty, rambling video for you to watch. And then also go ahead and follow me on Twitter at Luke Miani. And you know what? While you're doing all these things, thank you for doing them all. You might as well join my subreddit, Just get the trifecta. So with that said, I'll see you all in the next video. Have a good day.